to our very first ANZ virtual forum. Thank you for making time to join us. It's really great that we're going to be able to try this initiative out so that we can raise an awareness on what everyone else is doing across the different areas of expertise. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Lorian Strand, whose idea it was to organize this. He's also going to be the moderator for this call, and he's going to run us past some quote-unquote house rules so we know how to behave ourselves in the next hour or so. So over to you, Lorian.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Shiva. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is, as Shiva said, the first run of this session. So hopefully it will go smooth. It's not really that complex. Yeah, forgive us if there's any little snafus here or there. Before jumping into it, look, the purpose of this, as I think you probably would have seen from the newsletter, is the reality is there's 100 odd of us MVPs in Australia, but some of us know each other. Many of us don't know the rest of each other. So the intent of this session was for us to get to know each other a bit better and to also kind of showcase and explain who we are and what we do. So as Shiva said, yeah, first a few little housekeeping things. Can everyone see my screen? My slides? I've got one nod, that's fine, because most other people don't have video on. What I would probably ask though is for people who are presenting to turn your video on. I don't really care what your background looks like. We've all got background blur now. Or in my case, background hell. There we go. I'm in an office now. That's more professional. Alrighty. So, yeah, just a few little things. For people participating, please stay muted unless you're actually basically, unless the presenter gets to the end of their session and says, hey, any questions? Otherwise, please stay muted. Don't want to hear any dogs barking, doorbells, car sounds, side conversations, those kind of things. We've been on enough calls of this. Everyone actually will have a chance to be a presenter. So I will be sharing at the end of this a URL to a sway that you can go and see more information about it, as well as fill out a form. So we can just coordinate all this. What I would also ask, we've all been on tons of I guess, PGI calls. And we've all seen constant chatter coming up while we're actually trying to pay attention. So one thing I would ask is please try and keep the chatter to a minimum so that it doesn't distract the presenters. Otherwise, it keeps kind of popping up as they're presenting. Yeah, if you've got anything to share at the end of this, like any user groups or things, news bits and pieces, please feel free to do so at the end. So for the presenters, starting your engines. You've all got 8 minutes. I'm trying to keep it sharp because we MVPs tend to waffle. Not all of us, some, certainly me. So I do want to kind of keep this on track. So we'll have about 8 minutes to present. So what we'd like you to do is tell the audience about yourself. Tell us where you work, whether it's your company or who you work for. If you want to speak, you don't have to. What you're passionate about that effectively made you, got you to be an MVP. What is it you kind of live and breathe the most? And also what you do in the community and where you see or where you're seen in the community, because part of the challenge we have, I guess, as MVPs in our community is we see in our own little bubbles. So I know plenty of other office apps and services MVPs. I don't even know what the other MVP types are, like that Mark O'Shea character who's going to present today. I have no idea what he presents on or what he does. No, in all honesty though, you know, kind of talk about where you're seen in the community so that other people can have the opportunity to follow you or at least go, oh, okay, that makes sense. So with that, I think the first person to present is going to be Emma. So, hang on, was it Emma? No, it was Mark.
No, I thought it was Mark O'Shea.
Yes, it's Mark O'Shea.
Sorry.
So, Mr. Mark O'Shea, I'll ask you to step up to the microphone, please.
Okay, I'll just start sharing. So does this mean I'm number one?
You're number one, yes.
Okay. Now, I've just got to hope that this is the first time I've run or been on a Teams meeting since my network at home was swapped over to NBN. So I'm hoping that things actually work. Okay, so thanks everyone. My name's Mark O'Shea, and as you can see, I'm an MVP for Windows and devices for IT. surprisingly, despite the title, very little of the conversation is really a pure Windows conversation. It's more a matter of how Windows fits into the overall ecosystem, how it integrates with other components of the Microsoft 365 suite. And this is really a big part of what I'll talk about as we go through today's presentation, is that a lot of the time the conversation doesn't necessarily end up being completely around the things that you want to talk about. Instead, it's the other things that need to be happening inside the customer organization as you're trying to move your plans forward. Now, you can see my Twitter handles up here at InTunedIn. If you like seeing photos of birds, cats, and dogs, that would be an excellent one for you to add. But then for more of the MVP related content, that's generally over on my blog site. So let's start off with things that people like to hear when we're talking to them about, what can you actually let go of? So the important thing here is that as MVPs, a lot of the time we tend to be a little bit more aggressive in our thinking around what we want people to let go of. And for whatever reason, we find that, we normally get a fair bit of pushback on certain things. So sometimes it's really just a matter of making sure that, we're not going out there and saying that everything is wrong and everything you're doing is wrong and here's how to fix it. Instead, we need to really start positioning things to make sure that we can build on top of what they've already got. So we're not going to go in and do an aggressive, we need to rip out everything you've got because you don't need it anymore. Now, this is something where there might have been some customers who've resisted going to certain technologies because they thought of the amount of infrastructure change that may be required. But we still have to have these conversations, though, because if they want to start implementing things like Windows Hello for Business, there are going to be some upgrades to their internal infrastructure that they might need to make those things go smoothly. Now, one of the ones that makes Windows admins really happy is when we tell them that group policy can coexist with some of the more, the technologies that Microsoft is promoting more at the moment, such as mobile device management via Intune. Now, this is one of the areas where some of us will be saying, okay, well, why do you really need to hang on to group policy? And the customer's response can end up being, because that's how we've done it. They're the skills we've got. It's the way that things have worked in the past. So this is something that can be a little bit of a sensitive topic. So we don't go in and say we're going to rip out all your group policy settings and migrate everyone over to being on cloud-only devices. It's more a matter of leveraging things like hybrid domain join. And as you can imagine, when you start getting into conversations around hybrid domain join, which means we're connecting into Azure Active Directory as well as on-prem Active Directory, that opens up a whole new conversation set for a lot of traditional Windows admins. And the thing that I've been finding quite different this time around as we're talking about moving people off Windows 7 is going back to what I was mentioning about it being a more holistic conversation, where we're not just talking about Windows migrations. We're talking about, do you have Azure Active Directory deployed? Are you synchronizing user objects? If so, what approach you're actually taking? So depending on where the customer is, that's what really shapes the direction of these different conversations. Now, there are going to be some things that some of us might think of as, as legacy technologies that we're thinking, well, surely we can rip some of those things out. What we normally find is that it takes a lot longer to start pulling things out than we'd really like to. Now, sometimes we do get dream customers where they're willing to basically put complete faith in us and let us just sort of move at our own rate. But a lot of the time, it really is going to be a little bit more conservative than we'd really like. So if we can start presenting things like cloud scenarios where we're adding additional value, rather than saying you have to take what you've got and move it over to this, if it's something where we can show them additional benefits, if we can show them how their current skills can be moved across. So if it's a Windows admin with great deployment skills or someone with PowerShell skills, etc., there are things that we can move across fairly easily. And then one of the final things that people are happy to hear when we talk about modern management is that even if we're talking about doing new Windows deployments or in-place upgrades every year or year and a half, whatever it is that the customer's comfortable with, it takes a long time to get people to realize that in-place upgrade that I'm sure everyone on here has had several in-place upgrades on their machines over the last few years. Oh, I guess you have to be running Windows. If you're a Mac user, you probably haven't seen a Windows in place upgrade in all cases. But this is something where, just getting people to understand that's not the same kind of thing as going from XP to Windows 7 or even a Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration. These are much more incremental upgrades that are taking place. Now, what are some of the things inside of a customer environment that do make this conversation much easier? The first bullet point is kind of obvious. If they've already got some exposure to Windows 10 deployments and Office 365 Pro Plus, this really knocks out quite a few of the hurdles. And one of the things that does make this a lot easier, especially when we start looking at things like the Office 365 side, is that if they're already using Office 365, it means we don't have to have the why cloud conversation. It means we don't have to have the why Microsoft is your cloud provider conversation, because these are things that if we don't have to go back that many years, that was really a huge part of every conversation that some of us had to have with customers when we were talking about some of these things. Now, it gets easier if they are using some Office 365, if they're using some of the components of EMS, which means that they do have at least some of the basics of the Microsoft 365 conversation. Now, if it's a larger organization and they're looking at what are the things that will make the whole process easier for them? Like I've put System Center Configuration Manager in here because some of the things that you'll probably pick up if you're paying attention to certain people's Twitter feeds is that their config manager team always go out of their way to make sure that they're telling people that config manager is not going away, that it's something that they're still investing heavily in. And this is something that does have, quite a special role inside of larger organizations for management purposes and for deployment purposes. So if a customer is on a recent version of this, it means that it's not just that they've got the most recent version or a fairly recent version that supports Office Pro Plus and Windows 10 deployment and management, but it also means that they've gotten at least somewhat into the whole regular update lifecycle or regular upgrade lifecycle that they're going to have to deal with on the Windows 10 and the Office 365 side. Now, the final point here is kind of an obvious one, but one of the big conversation starters that has made all of this a lot easier is that end of support for Windows 7 is basically less than 6 months away now. And then for Office 2010, that goes into support in October of next year. Now, what are the things that make the conversation?
Sorry, Mark,
yep.
To interrupt, you've got about a minute left.
Okay.
I apologize.
Yep, no problem. So what makes the conversation harder? Effectively, if someone is just sort of pulling their head up now and saying, so what's this January 14 deadline? What do I have to do? So at that point, we've got people who are potentially trying to catch up on, let's say, 5 years or so of different technologies. Now, if they're thinking they've done that before, it's not the same now. If you think about whatever technology that you cover, if you think about how much that has changed in the last 5 years, all of a sudden we've got people who are probably going to be absolutely overwhelmed. And you could almost sort of pick the perfect storm in terms of what is the customer doing that's going to make this a really uncomfortable and unpleasant experience for them. So I've kind of got some of those things listed in here. And effectively, it means if they haven't been paying attention to some of the changes, that there is going to be, a really, really big learning curve here for them. So that's really it for me. That's my final slide. So I guess that probably brings me in just under the time, and we can switch over to any Q&A.
You're lucky on timing. I was just about to play the Oscar play you off fanfare music. Any questions for Mark before we switch over to Emma? Feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, Mark, sounds like you did such a fantastic job.
Yep.
There's no questions.
Okay, I'll go on mute now and over to Emma.
All right, Emma, take it away.
Woohoo! Hello, how are you? Let me just put this slideshow mode. Okay, there we go. Is that working? Happy?
All
I'm
good.
going to assume
Your
that's a
time
yes.
starts now.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you. So I'm a newbie. I got my second ring this year, so I think that makes me one of the youngest MVPs. I would have been the only female PowerPoint MVP, but then they changed the name, so now I'm one of all the other splendid Microsoft Office apps and service MVPs that we have throughout the Australia and the world. So I'm really, really proud of that fact. What I thought I would do today is share some of the hottest time-saving features that I've come across in the past while, the recent sort of changes that have happened in PowerPoint. So I thought you guys would be interested in some of those. So the other thing is I am sitting outside my daughter's school, so apologies for the blurry car background in advance. So my company is Presentation Studio that was basically built off the back of me being a complete PowerPoint geek. And I have been obsessed with PowerPoint since the year, since version, one of the very, very early versions in the 90s, anyway, put it that way. So now I've built a company based solely on delivering PowerPoint, but we help companies understand the insight to write, design, and then train people how to use PowerPoint. And back then, for me, it was really around making PowerPoint sexier and sort of ridding the world of bad PowerPoint and trying to help people to communicate their message visually. But now I've evolved to bring in the content. So if we can't help people with the words and the message, then we can't really transform the whole experience for the audience. So it's around creating the impact and adding value to presentations. So I think what I spend most of my time doing is transforming people's opinions around how to use PowerPoint. So I'm very much an advocate of using PowerPoint as a slide deck. So where you have dense text-heavy information and you share that to collaborate either online or PDF or whatever you're doing, but a report-based magazine tool. And then the opposite of that, which PowerPoint is also designed for, is that it's a speaker support tool that visualizes and brings out the key message to help support the speaker, to create engagement, to create an opportunity for the audience to connect and understand visually with what the speaker is saying. So I've narrowed it down to 4 of my favorite latest time-saving features. And the first one is Zoom, the Zoom feature. And it's not the delightful Zoom transition that I hope you just all saw, but the insert Zoom feature, which is basically where you can take your whole PowerPoint deck and segment out with sections, and then you click on insert Zoom and it automatically will create hyperlinks to the summary sections. So if I now click on one of these 4 boxes, Zoom, it's zoomed me into that section. I'll do that again. And then now I can loop within the Zoom section before I go back to that main agenda slide. So it looks a bit like this. When you click insert summary Zoom, you can select the slides that you want to have on your agenda slide or your menu, and it's real time. So what's awesome is that if I add something to one of those slides, it will then automatically update into the menu slide that I have here. So Zoom is definitely one of the features that the corporate world love lots, because they can then break presentations out into different speakers or sections of presentations that they're talking about. The next one would be good old Morph. So Morph has helped us a lot with animations, and it's helped us get clients making stuff appear more visual, and they love a bit of wow factor, but you've got to learn to moderate it. So we use it in the sense to pull some information out and animate it in an easy way. So for example, I tell everyone that you should never have a slide like this up on the screen because it's confusing and your audience will start drawing their own conclusions, and any speaker is there to share their point of view. So your point of view is what, and that key message is what should be on the screen behind you. This is the report and it supports you. It goes on the PDF or the handout tool. But morph means that I can select one of the sections of my slide. So I'm going to select the 55% growth, and I can then transition morph that to pull it out of the page in a really simple transition that has a bit of wow, and our clients love it when we train them how to use that. So all of these features, you have to have the, I think the subscription service of Office 365, that is pretty important. And one of the tools that came out yesterday, for me anyway, because I'm on, I don't know if we're all on varying rollouts of updates, but the icon search tool is now available. So I love the icons. I think they've invested up to over 800 icons now for PowerPoint, which is awesome. And they're really nice, cute ones, and they're quite consistent in their style. So now when you go insert icon, you can actually run a search filter which you couldn't do before. Before you had to sort of search through and hope that there was an icon relevant to what you were using. And the last of my top 4 features is dictate. And this is something that I'm loving, the focus and energy that Microsoft are putting into the accessibility features. So things like the AI tech that has gone into the auto text filters of working out what pictures are, and so that blind people can display them. Now to be able to dictate into Word, PowerPoint, everything is just brilliant, and it's so clever, it's so smart. Like the tech is really fast. I have noted that based on my internet speed, the reliability of the pickup of the words is pretty average, and so that's a major factor. I'm outside my kids' school and didn't want to do this real time. I probably should have been braver. Maybe next time I will. But it's so simple. You just literally click the dictate feature and read, and it is fast. You can talk really fast and it will still pick it up. So I was super impressed with that feature. Laurie, my timer's run off on my phone. I couldn't get it to start properly. How long have I got?
You've actually just about run out, but happy for you to go for another minute or so if you like.
No, that's perfect. I just I just wanted to check that was the case. I thought it was the case, but I just wanted to check. So those were my absolute favorites, and they're all quite recent, and I'd be love to take any questions.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute. Got a minute or two.
No questions. We're just also amazing. No one has any questions.
More a comment. That was brilliant.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Who's this?
Hamish Watson from Christchurch, New Zealand.
I'll pay you later.
Cheers.
Yeah, I've got to say, like, I love my PowerPoint. I love my transitions, my Zoom. I can't ever get Morph to do what I want it to do. But yeah, clearly, you know, I have nothing on your presentations.
There is a really good PowerPoint hack that I learned in Seattle with the PowerPoint team for Morph, and that is that you can, it's that they're calling it Bang Bang Morph. I don't know if any of you guys were in the room, but it's where you can, you know, you can basically select an object on one slide, call it something. So you bring up the panel, selection panel, and you name that object something. So say you call it X. Then you can go to the second slide, select an object, and you can, it can be a completely different object. Say it's a different icon of, say you could have a caterpillar on the first slide, you call it caterpillar. You take the next slide, you have a butterfly. And normally those two would not morph between each other because they're not the same shapes. So you can't do it. But if you go into the naming convention of the panel and you put exclamation marks in at the front, 2 exclamation marks, so it's bang, bang, then the title, it will morph between 2 different shapes, which is pretty cool too.
That is an awesome hack to know that I am going to have to try out this afternoon.
Yeah, you have to try it. And if I've got it ran the wrong way, then I'll share with everyone what it is, because I might have set it back to front. But I'll send Shiva a link of how to do it.
Excellent. Any questions from anybody else?
I'm John Liu. I just thought that was a really great presentation, and I want to update all my PowerPoints right now. I'm really inspired to fix all my PowerPoints and put a whole bunch of stuff.
Yay! Well, make sure you update your certainly Office 365, because when people don't, then they don't get those new features. So make sure you've got that running, because that's the main one. I'm sure as an MVP you would.
All right, with that, we will hand over. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thanks.
So we'll hand over to Wagner. Wagner, are you with us?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So let me share my slides.
All right, and I will start the clock.
Okay, can you guys see everything here?
We can.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll do a quick introduction about the Logic Apps. And before I start to do that, let's talk a little bit about me. And my name is Wagner Silveira, and I'm the Principal Integration Architect at Tita, also the Azure MVP. And if you need to talk to me or wanted to talk, the Twitter handle is W.Silveira, or you can find me on w.silveira@note2self.tech. And that's just the shameless plug to my blog. But now to what we really want to look at. What I'm going to do right now is a quick Logic Apps in a nutshell, so you guys have an idea of what Logic Apps is if you're not using it yet, right? And try to differentiate that a little bit from Microsoft Flow, because I know that a lot of people is working with flows right now. So try to show things that only Logic Apps can do, versus the things that people do as well on Flow. Then after that, if you're more interested on that, how to get started, what are documents that you can use, or where you can find more information. So in a nutshell, Logic Apps is something that you're going to be using to automate workflows and orchestrate business processes, right, in an easy way. If you've been using Flow before, you're going to have a similar experience, okay? We're going to find out-of-the-box connectors that is going to reduce integration challenges. Today, you have 275 plus connectors. People from the product group just gave up trying to count them because it's just too many. You can connect that to integrate data from the cloud and also on-premises using the on-premises data gateway. And you're going to be able to use things like business-to-business enterprise messaging. So for people that is working on that area, things like ADFACT or X12 messages and also old XML transformations, you're able to do that with Logic Apps. If you come, and finally, there is a powerful web-based workflow designer, just like we had on Microsoft Flow, right? If you go down the details a little bit more, one of the things that is quite different from Logic Apps is the pricing model. We don't have a free tier like we have in Flow. It's all micro-billing based in action. So every one of those boxes that you put inside the Logic Apps or Flow is going to be billed if and depending if it's being hit or not during the execution. If you need, you have also a subscription based or on a dedicated model that the integration SaaS environment. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. You have a cloud and a hybrid model, right? So you can do on-premise stuff that you can use it. Hello?
We can hear you. Someone.
Okay, I just hearing that like a really loud voice. Cool, thanks. So that's going to be interesting in the recording. So we have the cloud and the hybrid model with the on-premise data gateway allowing you to access data on-premise, or the VNet integration if you're using the ISP. And also you can do extensibility. You can create your own connectors if you don't have a connector that you want that you can use. From an implementation model, you can use the web-based portal, right? Or you can use the IDE. You can use Visual Studio, or you can use Visual Studio Code. So you have like a lot of different ways to implement logic apps compared to Flow, where you have to use the web-based model. From a monitoring point of view, you can monitor a single logic apps in the portal, but you can also aggregate a whole lot of logic apps and have an idea of your whole system and how the workflows on your systems are working through log analytics. So that is quite important when people, business is starting to look into how my system integration is working, if it's performing well, how are my errors being handled. From a governance point of view, is based on the Azure model. So if you use the subscriptions and resource groups, but on top of that, your blueprints and your management groups, all of that can be used as well to govern logic apps. And from an access control point of view, is the same using role-based access, right? So you have two roles. You have the logic apps contributor that gives you full control to do stuff, and you have the operator that allow you to manage things but not create logic apps or edit them. Integration test environment is basically a dedicated model. So it's something that you can have and run just for yourself instead of sharing with the rest of Azure. You can run your workloads there isolated. There's going to be paying a monthly subscription instead of the pay-as-you-go or the micro billing that you have on logic apps. On the other hand, it's going to allow you to have VNet integration. So if you need to integrate with other parts of your network inside Azure or on premises, that might be something that you need to use. And finally, it's aimed to large volumes of transactions because the cost of that is something like 5K a month. While on logic apps, you're going to be paying for just a number of executions, and the billing can be like 2 cents per 1,000 of executions or of actions, all the way to cents per hundreds of executions. So this is something that we can discuss a little bit more later, or if you have questions. The way that integration test environment looks like is represented as another region on the portal for you. From the development support, right, as I said, you have the Visual Studio with design support. So you can actually use Visual Studio in design there. You have Visual Studio Code, but you don't have any design support on that one. It's JSON, and you have to actually write the whole code. But on the other hand, latest extensions are starting to give you CI support on that. The deployment for logic apps can be automated, right? But it's usually based on ARM templates. And official guidance for that deployment is still in progress. So this whole history about how do you go and get a logic apps that you created on development and move it through the process to get it to production is still kind of evolving. What are the things that only logic apps can do? Based on what we just saw, IDE-based development, if you needed to develop it, you like to develop it using your IDE, that's the only, you can only do that with logic apps and not be able to do that with Flow. Support for automated deployment using ARM templates is also something that logic apps is going to offer to you compared to Flow. Access to code to fine tweaking. You can actually see the code of logic apps. You'll not be able to see the code for a Flow. And that aggregation and monitoring of via log analytics is something else that logic apps is going to give it to you. Finally, those business-to-business scenarios like AS2, EDFACT, those things that you would only be able to do that using logic apps. And even that integration via ICE. right? How to get started, because I can see that it's just running over time. The first place you can go is the Logic Apps documentation. So if you need more, know a little bit more, you can go to the Logic Apps documentation on Microsoft Talks. But you also have Pluralsight courses there. So for getting started with Logic Apps, you have like three courses from another MVP, Stephen Thomas, right? And there is a whole lot of MVP blogs that talks regularly about Logic Apps, including my one. So I'll share that with Shiva later on. If you'll be able to have those links if you need to. And that's the end of the presentation at this stage. I'm going to pause so we can have questions. I know that was a bit rushed, but it's a lot of information to get through 8 minutes.
Yeah, we don't really get much time. Unfortunately, we're trying to get as many people through as possible. But thank you for that presentation.
Exactly.
Are there any questions for Wagner? Can't leave him high and dry after the PowerPoint one. Surely somebody has some to type in. Otherwise, Emma's ruined it for everyone.
And I couldn't see her presentation, so now I'm reaching for the recording. There was something wrong with my Teams.
Oh, great job, Wagner.
Cool, thanks. So if no questions, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it on to Greg.
Yep, so then thanks for that again, Wagner. I really appreciate it. So the next presenter we have is Greg Alchin. Greg, are you with us?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. I will just jump up here and
take it away.
Ready to ride. Okay, so my name is Greg Alchin. I'm an MVP, as you can see there, on developer technologies. My speciality is accessibility. And so my background actually is that I am blind in my left eye and legally blind in my right eye. And that's one of the things that got me deeply passionate about good design and inclusive design, has been my own visual impairment. Now, why it's, and in my work, I consult with a lot of government, United Nations, and a range of businesses here in Australia and overseas. What I want to focus on is what our normal goal is for a lot of developers. Yes, we all want everything to be engaging and usable and safe and secure. We want that great customer satisfaction. And of course, our intent is that 100% of our users are going to be able to use what we've created. But there's a problem. What actually happens, though, is that only about 55% of our users actually have a really good user experience. About another 25% have some difficulty, and up to 20% of our users are at times excluded because of design decisions that people make. So what it comes down to, and you can see here on this scattergram, this whole concept of, yes, here's this group in the center that have a great experience. Then it goes out. And the reasons why the design disables people changes. And it depends on what the needs of those people are. Part of it comes down to this. We make assumptions about users. Those, for instance, we think that everybody with a print disability, as an example, is a blind or low vision. We go, no, they could be dyslexics and have other neurological issues. They could have low cognition. They could also come from a non-English speaking background. There's a whole variety of reasons. Well, by not thinking about the broad range of users, it limits our design thinking. And then normally what happens is that when we look at accessibility from a quality assurance perspective, we only do it at the final phase. We don't do it as part of the build from the start. And from the whole, we say from concept to completion, inclusive design and accessibility needs to be in there. And so the way forward, the sustainable and most cost-effective way, is inclusive design. And Microsoft has done some absolutely awesome work around here. One of the things I'll jump to in a moment is their inclusive design toolkit, which I can now say the United Nations has actually picked up and started to run with, which is pretty awesome. The fact that they're doing that, because it's transformed the conversation. So really what we're talking about here are those 3 points. Let's recognise exclusion. Exclusion is everywhere. The real issue is, how do we learn from diversity, whether it's diversity in gender, in age, in ability, whole range of things. But when we learn from that, we can solve for one and then extend it to many, and we get a cost-benefit analysis. PricewaterhouseCoopers have just, in conjunction with the Centre for Inclusive Design, Microsoft and Adobe have just released a report called The Benefits of Designing for Everybody. And PwC are saying that there is a 3 to 4 times benefit to an organisation when they start to embody inclusive design in their process. The first thing, when we talked about assumptions, is coming back to impairments as a spectrum. We have the permanent, we have temporary, and we have situational impairments. As an example, if any of you have been in a pub, and I've been known to frequent a pub at times, we're all deaf in a pub. That's why you'll see one of the greatest uses of closed captions is in hotels and in airports. But what it comes down to is this simple equation for us. Disability equals impairment plus barriers. So it's not, and people with permanent disability or permanent impairments around the world is sitting at around 18 to 20% of the market. But we know that as the market ages, it's even bigger. So at the age of 55, it's 1 in 3. Retirement age of 67, it's 1 in 2. And so, and again, when we look at from a literacy perspective on the Australian Bureau of Stats, 39% of our population has less than functional literacy. So the barriers we create in how we design, have we got good colour contrast, good font choice, all of those issues, have we labelled and named our buttons? Have we done all of those things? Have we used proper paragraph styles? They create barriers. And that's what disables and gives a negative user experience for people. Here's the thing about designing for one, extending to many. And this is from a US Census data. At any one time, there's about 26,000 people in the US with a permanent loss of one arm. But there's another 13 million who have an arm injury through an accident or illness. There's another 8 million who are new parents trying to nurse a child and do tasks one-handed. When we actually solve for the 26,000, we actually benefit another 21 million. Now, those figures can roar along in any of the areas, whether it's in hearing, whether it's in vision, whether it's in speech. There are benefits for all of us in that. Now, we've walked across that design of solve for one, extend for many every day. It's called a curb cut. That one simple design has benefited everybody, just as those OXO grips are amazing. They're originally designed for the wife of the owner of the company because she had arthritis. Those easy grip things became something we all went, yeah, I want to use that because it makes it easier. And of course, well, hey, the adaptive controller, it is awesome because you're now seeing people with significant physical disabilities being able to participate in gaming for the first time because of this great controller. It provides everybody with dignity of participation. And when we talk about dignity, and this is what we want, it's about how do we enable everybody to have these 4 criteria of independent access, equitable access, participation, and if it's a learning feature, growth, but that they are safe, they are satisfied, and they are connected. Those things provide dignity, and that's a positive user experience that we want everybody to have because that's what's going to maintain the stickiness. But good inclusive design makes us think about that because we ask those broader questions first off rather than starting to jump down a path without thinking about the broad needs of our potential users. What it does is this, it expands the utility. So when I start to look at the mobile view of Word, for instance, on my iPhone as an example, what I will see there is that it now has, it's reflowable. So it's extended the utility of the product onto that device. It enhances our brand value and brand recognition, which is really important because we want people to associate what we create as something that's really positive, something that's really valuable, and creates the stickiness. It also means that people who may not necessarily have been people who would have grabbed our product will now get it because it's something that they see the utility, they see that innovation, and they see the value. But what it also does is it decreases risk for us because under here in Australia, and there is some similar legislation in New Zealand, we've got the anti-discrimination laws. So now here in Australia, it's the Disability Discrimination Act. And we talk about equal access to information and services. So something that all websites, for instance, have to meet, whether it's an internet or intranet site or an app, has to be able to provide equal access to information and services. How we do that is we measure up against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And so it has to be include level A and AA success criteria. The other thing, though, is changing procurement rules, not only here in Australia, but through America and through Europe. So we now have consistent procurement rules to do with adding accessibility requirements into the procurement of ICT. So at the there's in New South Wales, as an example, there's a whole new procurement process coming into place, and it's building on what is called AS-EN 301-549. It's the Australian standard on accessibility requirements. Here in Australia, what we did was we went, we like what the Europeans have done. We grabbed their procurement standard and adopted it, holus bolus. If you open up the first page of the Australian standard, it actually says this is an exact copy. So there is a lot of value. So you're going, if your products aren't being designed to accessibility standards, you're actually going to be precluded from accessing certain markets. So it's something that we all need to be taking on board, but inclusive design is the methodology we would use. Accessibility is how we will test against that inclusive design process. Now, I want to just quickly jump to here to show you a few links. One is this one here. Microsoft's great design system, the inclusive design resources that are sitting here on this site are world-class. And so I would go into there. You can download the toolkit. That's where I would start to have a good read. It's only about 10 pages, absolutely superb. Of course, from a developer practice, look at this. You've got some great existing resources sitting here within our dev center. Have a look at whether it's you're using the visual UI design or you're going into what you're doing with Studio or Azure or any of the pieces. You'll see there is a wealth of resources there that you can start to access. The other thing that you want to look at is the Microsoft Accessibility Features Sway. And this is where all the features are, because just like you personalize your car, you personalize your driving position, we want people to not only personalize their operating system, but personalize how they use all the great apps that are out there. And this Sway has a lot of those features. Finally, since Emma's brilliant talk on PowerPoint, what I'd also want to do is jump in this. Here's some great resources for everybody on how to make your PowerPoint presentation accessible for people with disabilities. And of course, you'll notice if you're on Office 365, under the Review tab, you've got Check Accessibility. Now, it doesn't check everything, but it checks a hell of a lot. And so that's where I would be going to have a look. Now, there is a similar one, of course. If I scroll down to the bottom of the screen here, just very quickly, what it will also do for me is I can now bring up similar ones there for Word and Excel and Outlook. But you'll also find more information about the accessibility checker that's inbuilt in all of these. So it's something well worthwhile to have a look at.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. Any questions from anyone?
That was marvelous, Greg. Can you do us a favor of just copy pasting the links to those in the chat window so everyone could just follow through them if they want to have a look?
for
I
sure.
absolutely loved your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg, too. I really loved it. I just love seeing how all the accessibility features are being used. So thank you for sharing.
Not a problem. And I'm going to put everything in the links there now.
Fantastic. All right. So any other questions for Greg, or is everyone kind of content? All right. Well, I've done I think a decent job of keeping everyone on schedule. So we actually have a little bit of time left over. I wanted to, before I kind of open up the floor, just where I can get the chat window going, make the comment that anybody, as I said at the start, anybody is actually welcome to present. In fact, you're all actually invited, and we'd really love everyone to present. But what we just need to do is you just need to fill out a form so that I can see what you're presenting on, when you're available to do it. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get through absolutely everybody, but I'll certainly try, unless people want to shrink their speaking time window down to 5 minutes. It's going to be a little bit of a stretch. Yeah, I will paste that URL in first shortly. But if anybody wants to kind of speak up and say if they've got any user groups coming up or any events, you are welcome to unmute yourself and jump on in.
I might just hijack that. Can I get dibs? It's Shiva.
Sure thing, boss.
Lorian, do you want to copy paste the link to the forms in the chat window as well, so that people can see how they can submit their proposals, or what do we call it? Call for paper. No, it's not a call for paper. It's just a call for a chat.
I'd actually like to, except I've lost the chat window.
Yeah, so Lorian's going to do that. The one thing I just want to remind everyone is on the 6th of August, that's Tuesday week, so not next week, but next week, we're hosting our first MVP event here in Sydney. Greg is actually going to present that evening, along with a few other MVPs from overseas who are attending the Digital Workplace Conference. The details of that event is actually in our MVP ANZ main themes theme. And you should be able, all I ask is please make sure you RSVP. I believe next week is the deadline, because I want to make sure that we have enough food for everyone. I've also asked, if possible, please do bring a +1, ideally from, and that person would ideally come from an underrepresented group in our community. It would be great for them to get to know the MVP community and the work that we do. So please follow that link, or especially for those who are in New Zealand who might not be able to come, but you know of somebody who is in Sydney who might want to be in this event, please do invite them. I'm sure we can find them people who will look after them that evening, or you can let me know so I can keep an eye out for them. That's it for me. And obviously, sorry, one last thing, please keep an eye out for our sway that's coming out next week. And the theme for this particular month is on developing your personal brand. So we've got some really interesting content coming up in the next few days, and I'll make sure it lands in your inbox before the end of the month next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Shiva.
Thanks, Shiva.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for great presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So no one's got any events to announce? All good? That was
Thanks,
just
Shiva.
me plugging the last few minutes. No, okay. Well, have a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you for making time to join us this afternoon. I'll make this recording available to those who were not able to join us, or I'll figure out how to do that, but please,
I'll help you.
Yes, thanks, Lorian. We'll make so for reference, the next schedule for our next virtual forum will be, again, the last Friday of each month. So that would be August 30. Yep, 30th of August. Most likely same time. And if you have any suggestions or ideas on how we could do this better, please let us know. Thank you and have a lovely weekend. Thanks for participating. And thank you to the presenters. You all did a marvelous job. Thank you, Emma. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Wagner. I know you were up like at 1 or 2 in the morning in Brazil and you're enjoying your last few days with your family over there. Thanks, Greg, for putting that excellent presentation together. And Lorian, thank you for organizing this. It's a brilliant idea. Everyone loves it. Thank you so much. Oh, and Australia Power Platform Summit happening in Melbourne on the week of the 20-something of August, I believe. That's, the week of the 20th of August. That's when it's happening in Melbourne. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely weekend. See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.